A lot of Nick Cannon's success is based on one word: others. Writing for others, producing for others, creating a platform for others, and he's profited heavily for that. So his biggest windfall is, in case you don't know, Wild 'N Out. In July 28, 2005, he developed Wild 'N Out, a sketch comedy show. However, after about 4 seasons, a strange thing happened. It went off the air. So in November 2012, it was announced that the series was returning in 2013 after a 6-year hiatus, which is pretty long for a show. And nowadays you may hear shows coming back, but back then you didn't hear too much about shows coming back. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to look at his chart to see if I can identify the points in his charts that indicate that something like this would happen. Like he would have this return opportunity based on something he created earlier. So I'm looking at his chart for 2005 and 2013 and comparing the two. So I looked at Cannon's chart for the time period when he originally created Wild 'N Out, which of course was 2005, and I found a common link. Now, if you've watched any of my other recent videos, you've probably heard me mention this link between the ascendant and the midheaven. And whenever I see this type of connection, it usually means that a person has an opportunity to branch off and do something on their own, to succeed on their own outside of their regular 9 to 5. So I explained, so just to give you some explanation here, this was based on his progress chart. And if you don't know what a progress chart is basically this. Your birth chart is the moment that you were born, like what the planets look like at that particular time, the houses they were in and the sign they were in and all of that good stuff. Well, to progress your chart forward, you would move your chart forward for a specific day and time. Like you can move it forward for today, and the planets and houses would shift. Basically, most of the time they move forward. So once they move forward, that creates its own chart, right? And you can absolutely analyze the progress chart on its own. But what I like to do the most, what I find to be the most accurate, is to analyze the progress chart and compare it to the progress chart towards the birth chart and look for aspects or relationships between planets and angles. Hope you're following what I'm saying so far. So this is what I did for Nick Cannon in 2000 for his chart in 2005. And when I looked at his progress chart compared to his birth chart, what I found was that he had progressed midheaven, or MC, trine birth chart and natal Mercury. So this, I feel, is a key aspect of him succeeding for the show Wild 'N Out, because in case you don't know, he is the executive producer for Wild 'N Out. And so basically he's the boss. So this was an opportunity for him to branch out in a big way. He created other things earlier, starting very young, but this was something that he had an opportunity to branch out with. So, and as far as the connection, it is the ascendant and the midheaven, because of course midheaven, progressed midheaven, against trining the natal Mercury. So the Mercury connection to his ascendant is actually the rulership. So his ascendant, or his rising sign, is Gemini. Nick is a Libra. His sun is a Libra, but he is a rising Gemini. And Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury. So there is in the that is the ascendant and midheaven connection that I was referring to. That creates a scenario where a person has a chance to really succeed on their own, in their own business. So when I look at the solar return chart for 2005, that can be analyzed solo. But what I like to do is lay the solar return chart over the birth chart, and that gives me a lot more information. I feel like it gives me a better perspective of what the person's year is going to be like. And what I saw when I did that is that he had his solar return 8th house in his natal 5th house. And so this is like other people's resources over the area of talent. self-expression, entertainment industry, basically. So to me, what this says is that he was more likely to utilize other people's talent. That was going to be his resource. It wasn't necessarily going to be a personal resource, a personal talent of his. He was using other people's talent. And if you've seen Wildin' Out, the way the show is lined up, there's like a line of comedians, and they do different skits, they do different little challenges, they rap against each other, different competitions, and they're broken up into two groups. So, and this has actually helped a lot of people branch off. So he's using their talent to develop this show. Also, he had his solar return, Neptune sextiling his solar return midheaven. So this created another ascendant midheaven link, but just in a solar return chart. All right, so then what I did was I took a look at his 2013 solar return chart. And I wanted to see if I found any patterns, any similarities, anything that really stood out to me to suggest that this situation will come around again. Because as I said, after 4 seasons, the show actually ended or stopped airing. So in 2013, for his solar return chart, I did find some things that were interesting. There were some things that were repeated from his 2005 chart. For instance, he had his solar return Venus conjunct natal Venus. So conjunct means that it was in the exact same spot, same sign within a couple of degrees. And so that's what he had. He had that in the solar return 2013 chart, and he also had it prior in his 2005 solar return chart. So that was a repeat. And so that's something to really pay attention to if you're serious about learning astrology, how to analyze a chart and understand what you're looking at. It's not uncommon for me to see repetition, and our charts do have a tendency to repeat itself when a similar situation is going to return, even if it's years later. So that's a key thing to remember. But this is what he had between 2005 and then again 2013. He also had his solar return 8th house over his natal 5th house again. And goes back to him using other people's talent and resources in the entertainment industry. So he uses it for himself. It's not his talent. Not saying that Nick doesn't have any talent. I mean, writing and creating a show or something like that, to me, is kind of a talent of its own. But to me, his chart is suggesting that he wasn't solely relying on his own talent. He was relying on other people's talent. So this is one of the reasons why I do like to do what I call past work on people's charts, because sometimes for some people, the chart will duplicate things and indicate a similar situation coming around. I've actually seen this a couple of times where something comes back again. It could be anything from a person marrying more than once and all sorts of things. You'll see a pattern being repeated. So I also found, but this was a little bit unique to me. He had, in 2013, his solar return chart, he had his solar return yod, a yod with Uranus at the apex at the top, and he had Mercury and Venus at the bottom. And they were toward his solar return 2nd house and 11th house. So as I've described before, a yod is a major configuration, and it's major because it connects 3 planets, and they create a shape, basically. That shape that's created is a triangle. And so it's a very long triangle, very tip top is the planet for him in solar return. It was Uranus. And at the very bottom, there's 2 planets that sextile each other. Sextile relationship is basically an opportunity. It's positive. So he had that between Mercury and Venus, and that was around 2nd and 11th house. All right. Well, it was actually solar return 2nd house in natal 11th house, to make that correction in case you decide to look for it yourself. So just to give you some ideas, I know I just described the yod, like what it looks like. It's triangles, like a very long triangle. Some characteristics of a yod is, for one, it seems sudden, but it usually is not sudden. It almost always references something that is long term, meaning it's what the yod will describe an event that's going to take place. It can describe an event that's going to take place, and it'll seem like the event came out of nowhere, but in reality, it's something that the person has had going on for a long time. And this actually suits his particular situation, given that the show had originally started in 2005. And then in his solar return chart in 2013, he has this big yod because he was returning back to something that he had already started previously. And so the yod was a really good way to identify that something like that was coming up. And also, the yod tends to represent, as I've read before, steep highs or steep lows. It's either a really big low, a really big crash, something bad happens, or something really, really great happens, and it seems to be extraordinary. So this is when Wild 'N Out really took off, was the second time around in 2013. And so those are a couple of things to consider when it comes to a yod. And if you do research, people will say that yods are rare. And I will admit, I don't always see them in birth charts, but it's not uncommon for me to see them in like progress charts or solar return charts. And when I do see them, I definitely pay attention because, as I said, it suggests that there's something cumulative, a cumulative event, something that's been going on for a long time is now going to come to a head. And that's basically what happens here. All right, so then Uranus, which is at the apex of that yod, rules his natal 10th house. And the 10th house rules the vocation, the career. And so with me describing this yod being something that could be extraordinary, this was sure to boost his career in a really big way, like an unexpected gain or win with the revival of Wild 'N Out. Also, he had his natal Uranus conjunct or close to the solar return North Node. I'll admit I don't talk about the North Node a whole lot. I don't intend to talk about it a whole lot, but the best way I can describe it is when I see it in someone's chart, the first thing I think is the phrase, I have to, then blank, finish it. So it's like if you're starting a sentence, you say, I have to. And usually when I see a North Node really close to a planet, to me, that planet suggests something that the person has to do. So for him to have Uranus conjunct the solar return North Node, that in itself is saying, hey, I have to do something related to my career. This is going to be a big deal, really big deal. He also he does profit from other people's talent, and so in the 12th house in a chart well, let me put it this way. I'll back up a little bit. Nick in his birth chart is heavily populated in the 5th house. He has a lot of planets there, and the ruler of his 8th house is in that 5th house, which suggests to me in his birth chart, before even looking at his progress chart, his solar return for 2005, solar return for 2013, that his chart is already saying that this person has an opportunity to succeed based on other people's talent, other people's resources, other people's things. So this is something to consider in your own chart. The ruler of your 8th house, which usually represents, some people call it other people's money, and it is the house of other people's money. This is where you find like credit, insurance, inheritances, royalties, stuff like that, credit cards, loans, all that stuff. It's considered other people's money, and that's where that thing is. That's where that stuff is. But because the 8th house represents other people's stuff, the ruler of the 8th house, it's worth it to look to see where that shows up in a person's chart, because it can say something about if that person is using other people's fill in the blank. Whatever house is in, what is that person using? That's other people, that belongs to somebody else that they may be benefiting from. So just a word, just something to consider. But overall, I do feel like Nick was obviously he was bound to benefit from people in this way, And I think it's an important lesson that everybody does not succeed in the same way. There's different ways to succeed. And I think it's important to look at your chart and look to see how you are supposed to succeed or how I'm supposed to succeed, not look at someone else's life and say, well, let me try that and do that. Think about it. How many times have you done something that somebody else did and they did great, and then when you tried it, you just totally flopped? And this is one of the reasons why I feel like our chart tells us what we're supposed to be doing, what we need to concentrate on so that we can succeed. And so in this situation, Nick was destined to succeed through other people's talent. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you've been able to follow along, and I hope this sparks your interest in looking at your own chart or maybe even others' chart to understand where your opportunities are. Are. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you next time.